Hi, in this second lecture on alternatives, I'm going to walk through some monographs of alternative herbs. These are not necessarily the best alternatives. There are loads of alternatives, but these are ones that you might not have come across before. So there's juglans species, both the American butternut and European walnut, Iris versicolor or blue flag, Viola tricolor, heartsease, Materia officinalis, fumitory, and Menanthes trifoliata, bogbean. So first the juglans. We use the bark, the hull, or the leaves of this, and it's often called butternuts, but not to be confused with butternut squash, completely different species. Qualities in common with the other juglan species, it's a fragrant bitter, so although it's got that bitter cooling effect, because it's fragrant, it's warm as well and heating. Juglans is a pushy tonic to the bowel, has a mild cathartic effect, and have a look at my handout on eliminants to see where that fits into the scheme of things, effect on the bowel. It's cholagogue, meaning that it brings forth bile from the gallbladder, and anthelmintic, so it works against worms, the helminthes. Applications: it can be used in chronic constipation with dyspepsia, as a vermifuge or anthelmintic against pinworms, threadworms and tapeworms, and it can also be used for skin eruptions. So I can just imagine the scene, the herbalist being, well, what's this here, and this funny sort of skin rash here, what do you do for that? Well, I don't know what it is, but I've used butternut, I've used juglans with it, and that cures worms, so maybe it's a worm. Okay, what should we call it then? Well, it's in a ring, so we call it ringworm. Yeah, job's a good one. Anyway, I don't know, just made that story up. Main constituents are naphthoquinones, and these have a laxative effect, but are also poisonous to these horrible little squirmy things. Appreciable amounts of tannin, but also volatile oil and fixed oil, so it's quite a nutrients-rich remedy, especially if you actually eat the nuts. And the volatile oil gives it that fragrance, that sort of stimulating effect. Be cautious with butternut in pregnancy, although European walnut, there's no cautions known with that, but just be aware that if you're using the hulls or the leaves, it's going to be much more potent than just eating the walnuts. So accordingly, no more than 3 meals in a single dose, so that works out, multiplies up to about 60 meals a week as a top dose, but start small with your dosage and watch what's happening with your patient. So for Europeans, maybe it makes more sense to actually use European herbs. So instead of using butternut, juglans cineraria, we use juglans regia or juglans nigra, which are European walnut species. Iris versicolor, blue flag. Now I don't know why it's called blue flag, because as you can see the flowers are really, the flag-like flowers are really more purple than blue, but they probably vary. What we use is the rhizome. Qualities: in common with a lot of monocots, it's cool, comes under the moon, very fleshy, but iris is also quite dry and bitter, especially when you're talking about the root. Slightly sweet tasting, but quite pungent. And the main effects are cleansing, decongesting and stimulating. So quite a pokey herb. Principal actions: depurative, so blood cleansing, lymphatic, alterative, and has diuretic properties. So all these combine to alleviate skin problems, acne, eczema, herpes problems, psoriasis, and it relieves itchiness, pruritus. Also applied to rheumatoid arthritis and toxic sciatica. It's useful with this hepatic congestion with venous and lymphatic stasis. Again, it brings forth bile. It's a cholagogue. It can be used in hepatitis, jaundice, and pruritus arising from liver congestion. Iris versicolor is also a pancreatic agent, so bear that in mind with blood sugar and so on. It's a digestive remedy. It has application in indigestion, digestive insufficiency, and wind, flatus. Laxative for use in constipation, and it's also antiemetic, preventing vomiting. So it kind of shares this with some other monocots, for example, sweet flag, Acorus calamus, ginger, Zingibera officinale, and Alpinia officinarum or galangal. All of these are monocots which have that antiemetic side to them, so they're quite sort of fragrant plants. Iris is also an adrenal agent and active on the thyroid, so it's indicated where there's an underactive thyroid, and if you compare it with horseradish, this really makes sense, because where horseradish is contraindicated in underactive thyroid, Iris would be quite good there, because it's got that kind of sort of fragrant bit. It's got a heating element, but it's also decongesting, so it will sort of get all that sort of stuck stuff moving and really make a difference. Dosage: 2 mils tops for a single dose. That would work out about 40 mils a week. So it's got tannins and resins in, but appreciable amounts of salicylic acid, so anti-inflammatory, and the volatile oil gives it that pungent effect. Viola tricolor, heartsease or wild pansy. Moist, temperate in nature, sweet and pungent in taste. It's in common with quite a few of the alterative remedies. It comes under Saturn in the old books. So the Saturnine plants are especially applicable to skin conditions and problems with the joints. We use the leaves and the flowers of Viola trick. And principal actions: it's an alterative for chronic skin disorders like eczema, acne, and urticaria. But it's also anti-inflammatory to the urinary tract and to the respiratory tract, and is also antibacterial and antifungal for both of those body systems. In addition, it's expectorant and demulcent, so it's got application in bronchitis, asthma, and pertussis, where there's maybe congestion of mucus and spasm going on. So if we reduce that spasm and liquefy the secretions so that you get the stuff coughed up. While it has a reputation specifically for capillary fragility and hemorrhage, for sort of improving those situations. And this is reflected in the constituents. The rutin and flavonoids are both nutritive constituents for the vessel walls, keeping them nice and smooth and mopping up any oxidation. The saponins in viola gives it that Beckic expectorant effect, sort of irritating to keep the cough going. Bitter principle gives you the purgative effect, I suppose. Salicylates are anti-inflammatory again, and the mucilage will soothe. It will have a demulcent effect. And dosage, you can go as high as you like, really. Very benign herb. Fumisteria officinalis is maybe one to handle a bit more carefully. It's also saturnine, but it's much colder and drier than Viola Trick. Has quite an acrid taste, and we use the whole plant in flower. It's called Fumisteria because you can't kind of see it from this photograph. It's quite close up, but if you see it from a distance, it looks as if the earth is smoking. Fumisteria looks like smoke just coming out of the earth, and it will suddenly crop up where you weren't expecting it, maybe in a lawn or something, and it wasn't there last year or the year before, going back maybe 7 years, and suddenly there it is. So pick it when you see it, because you might not see it again. Useful for chronic skin conditions as an alternative. Again, cholagogue increases bile excretion, but is also antispasmodic for the gallbladder and sedative. So very useful for gallstone, colic and migraine. So it will sort of ease the passage of small stones, and also if a migraine, particularly if a migraine has a liverish origin, Fumisteria is a quite good sedative in that case. It is also laxative and diuretic, so opening up lots of eliminative channels there. Dosage fairly unremarkable, but traditionally it's only used for 15 days at a time. Some books say that if you use it any longer, it starts to be narcotic and making people pretty spaced out. Special features is that it balances bile flow, and you find that in traditional humoral medicine it's used in a lot of formulae for ripening and purging melancholy in particular, and this ties in with the saturnine attribution. Constituents: it contains protopine alkaloids, which are similar in some ways to the opiates. Contains a bitter principle and also a resin, which probably accounts for the acrid nature. Finally, Mignathys trifoliata, bog bean or buck bean. It grows in bogs. It's actually a kind of water plant. It is rooted in the base of the bog. Very bitter, mercurial attribution to mercury. We'll develop that later on when we come to the applications, and we use these leaflets. So although it's got these 3 leaves, it's not related to clover at all. It's a completely different kind of species. It's in a kind of family on its own, the Mignathisiae. Principal actions: anti-rheumatic, diuretic and laxative, and it's specifically indicated in rheumatoid arthritis with general weakness, especially with apium, celery seeds, and Simsfuga, black cohosh. But it's also laxative. It stimulates the colon walls, and it's specifically indicated with its intestinal parasites, but no diarrhea. So this is where the mercury bit comes in, because it's associated with the colon, the large bowel, and that traditionally is ruled by Virgo, and the ruling planet for Virgo is Mercury. So it's kind of telling you to help with the meteorism, sort of colic. So although it's not antispasmodic, it will sort of smooth things out by sort of giving an external stimulus to the colon. So bitter iridoids, again, iridoid glycosides, and lots of other components, including vitamin C. So particularly if you were to have fresh bog bean, not only give you good clear out, but also you're getting some vitamins as well. And there you have it. Do have a look at all the other alternatives on the handout, as I say, and look at stuff from last year, and just see how that fits into the alternative scheme of things. It's quite a difficult tissue state, the congested tissue state, to understand in some ways, and thinking is developing on it. So any contribution is welcome. Thank you.